If today has asked a lot of you, and you're tired of being the strong one, you can put it all down for a while. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere quiet. It's Christmas Eve, 1906. A single steamship glides through a snowy bay, her black hull surrounded by thin silver ice, her windows glowing soft and gold. When the water freezes and the engines fall silent, a kind, experienced sailor walks the decks and turns this ship into a floating house of warmth and rest. And for one snowbound night, there are no deadlines, no demands, only golden lamplight, soft footsteps in the corridor, and a safe, warm place for you to breathe. On the evening of Christmas Eve, 1906, the steamship moved with a slow and thoughtful grace across the dark water, as if it knew the night deserved a gentler pace. Her hull was black and glossy, the color of ink wet on paper, and along her sides, the round windows shone with soft, golden light. From a distance, she might have looked like some long, low creature of the sea, carrying in her body a string of quiet, floating stars. Above, her single funnel breathed out a steady plume of pale smoke that drifted backward and thinned into the cold air. The world around her was dim and tender, wrapped in a veil of cloud through which the moon glowed like a shy lamp behind frosted glass. Snow had already begun to fall in delicate, hesitant flakes, soft and slow, as if it were tasting the air before committing to the night. On the forward promenade deck, a handful of passengers stood close to the rail, shoulders hunched in their coats, collars turned up against the prickle of cold. Their footsteps left faint, temporary prints on the dusting of snow that had settled on the planks. Each step a brief impression that blurred and faded as new flakes arrived. They peered ahead toward the dark line of land, where a scatter of tiny yellow points trembled at the edge of sight. Those were the lamps of the harbor town, the lights of houses and inns, and the tall windows of the little church on the hill. In this clear, expectant hour, the town seemed to hover just beyond reach, like a promise. The passengers watched it in silence, each holding some private wish for arrival, for warmth, for doors opening after a long journey. The senior steward walked the length of the deck with his steady, measured tread, his boots soundless on the snow. He had been with the ship for many years, longer than some of the sailors on board had been alive, and he carried his familiarity with her not as pride, but as a quiet responsibility. His name was Mr. Anders, though most of the crew simply called him Steward in that respectful, habitual way that made the title feel like his true name. His coat was buttoned neatly to the throat, and a woolen scarf, carefully wrapped, protected the vulnerable line of his neck. Snowflakes caught in the graying hair at his temples and melted into glistening drops, but he seemed almost unaware of the cold. As he moved, his eyes drifted from rail to rigging, from passengers' faces to the warm glow behind the portholes, always attentive, always calm. He paused near a group of travelers gathered at the starboard rail. A boy in a knitted cap was leaning out as far as he dared, pointing toward the faint cluster of lights on shore. "Is that our town?" the boy asked, his voice a soft puff in the cold air. Anders followed the small hand's gesture and saw the distant lamps, their reflections shivering on the dark water. "Yes," he said gently, his tone quiet and sure. "That is your town. We are drawing closer every minute." The boy's mother smiled at the steward with tired gratitude, and he responded with a slight nod, an almost invisible bow that conveyed both courtesy and care. He moved on, leaving them with the sight of their nearing home. Though he did not say it aloud, Anders knew that the night had a particular mood, a softness that felt almost like a dream. The snow was not yet heavy, not yet insistent, but it was constant, drifting down in silver threads that grew brighter whenever they passed through the glow of a deck lamp. The wind was light, almost hesitant, a cool hand resting gently against the ship's flank rather than a push or a shove. The water itself had changed as the ship neared the harbor. It had lost the long, rolling swell of the open sea and become smoother, more deliberate, as if thickening beneath the keel. None of these things troubled him. They were simply details to be observed and held in mind, part of the delicate balance of sea, weather, and steel that he had lived with for half a lifetime. Below the passengers' feet and the steward's quiet steps, the ship breathed in her own way. Somewhere deep within, the engine turned with a slow, confident rhythm, a quiet, comforting thump and whirl that pulsed through the floors and bulkheads. It was an almost living sound, a heartbeat of iron and steam in the cabins and corridors. That pulse translated into a faint vibration that one felt more than heard, a constant reassurance that the vessel was alive and moving forward. Lights burned soft and steady in sconces along the walls, their glass chimneys haloed by little rings of mist where warmth met cold. The air inside smelled of polished wood and coal, of woolen coats hung neatly in small cupboards, of soap and boiled water, and the last traces of dinner. Anders descended from the deck to the main saloon, taking the stairs slowly, one hand resting lightly on the carved rail. He moved through the wide room with its upholstered chairs and dark paneled walls, noting how many passengers lingered there, still wrapped in coats, talking in low voices. A few had placed their bags beside their feet, ready for quick disembarkation once they reached the pier. Others sat more heavily, letting the warmth of the room soak into their bones, in no hurry to leave the safe, enclosed world they had come to know over the past days. A pianist had played earlier, simple carols and soft waltzes, but now the instrument stood closed, its keys hidden, its presence a quiet reminder of melodies that still seemed to float invisibly in the air. He paused at a table where an elderly couple sat close together, their hands resting on the polished surface, fingers lightly touching. The man, with his silver beard and lined face, looked up at Anders with mild curiosity. "How much longer, steward?" he asked. There was no impatience in the question, only a gentle weariness. Anders offered a reassuring smile. "We are close now, sir," he said softly. "The harbor is ahead. We may be a little slower than usual in this snow, but the ship is steady, and the captain is careful." The woman nodded, as if this matched the quiet understanding she already held. "It is a peaceful night," she murmured. Anders agreed. "Yes, madam, very peaceful." He continued on, making a circuit through the adjoining corridors, pushing open doors to the promenade, checking that the lamps were trimmed and that no draught crept where it should not. The snow whispered at the windows, laying a light lace of white along the sills. But inside the ship, the air remained warm and dry. In the second-class lounge, a few children sat on the floor by their parents' feet, playing some slow, quiet game with buttons and scraps of paper, their voices hushed as though they knew instinctively that the night wanted softness. Anders stopped to watch them for a moment, letting the sight rest gently in his mind, like a small candle glowing far within. When he reached the crew's passageway, he spoke briefly with a young sailor on duty at the hatch, a boy whose breath misted in front of him each time the door opened to the outer deck. "All calm, steward," the sailor reported. "Snow's a bit thicker, but the sea's easy." Anders rested a hand on the bulkhead, feeling the subtle change in the ship's motion. "We are near the harbor," he said. "The water grows shallow, and the ship feels it. Keep your eyes open, but do not worry." The boy smiled, some tension easing from his shoulders at the older man's calm tone. "Yes, steward," he replied quietly. Returning once more to the forward deck, Anders stepped into the open air and let the cold touch his face. The snow was falling more steadily now, the flakes larger and softer, turning the ship's dark rails and fittings white. The distant town lights flickered, sometimes clear and bright, sometimes blurred behind passing veils of white. The The funnel's plume rose into the dim sky, then spread out in a pale, gentle cloud that mingled with the falling snow. The sea, though still open, had taken on a different look, its surface duller, the waves smaller and slower, as if the cold had laid a soft hand upon it and hushed its usual movement. He walked to the bow and stood there a while, gloved hands resting lightly on the rail. Above him, the stars were mostly veiled, but now and then a faint silver point appeared between drifting shreds of cloud. The moon was a muted disk, gently glowing behind the snowy mist, lending a soft, even light to the world. In that dim radiance, the ship seemed almost timeless, her black hull and golden windows like something out of a winter tale told to children before sleep. Anders felt the familiar, quiet trust settle over him, the trust he had always placed in this vessel and in the sea that carried her. Whatever the night chose to bring, she was strong, and he was here, walking her decks, keeping watch. Behind him, the passengers on the promenade talked in low voices, their words barely rising above the hush of snow and sea. Some spoke of home and fires waiting in hearths, of tables laid for supper, of church bells that would ring out later that evening from the village spire. Others simply stood, gazing at the lights ahead, letting their thoughts drift like the flakes around them. The ship moved forward with a steady, careful rhythm. Her engine slowed, her wake a faint, silvery trail in the dark water. It felt as though time itself had softened, stretching gently, giving the night a broader, quieter space in which to unfold. Anders took one last slow turn along the deck, his senses open, his steps unhurried. The snow, the distant town, the steady thrum underfoot, the soft glow behind every window. He gathered these impressions and held them close, like a series of small, peaceful pictures. He could feel that the night was deepening, that the snow meant to stay, that the harbor would be approached with more care than usual. Yet nothing in him was anxious. It was a Christmas Eve on the northern sea, and the old steamship was strong and warm, a gentle, moving house upon the water. As he turned toward the door that led back inside, the snow brushed against his coat in soft, white kisses, and the ship continued on, quiet and sure, into the falling, silver night. As the evening drifted onward, the boundary between sea and sky grew softer, blurred by the patient fall of snow. The world seemed reduced to a few simple elements: the dark body of the ship, the pale, muffled sky, and the wide stretch of water that was no longer truly water, not in the way it had been earlier in the day. The change came gradually, like a whispered suggestion. At first, only small, delicate plates of ice formed along the ship's wake, thin as glass and bright as mirrors. When they caught the faint light, they floated side by side, touching, moving gently apart, and touching again, like a quiet conversation in another language. The ship's passage broke them with no more effort than it took to part mist, but they came together once more in her wake, a soft, silver trail closing slowly behind her. Mr. Anders felt the shift not only beneath his boots, but in the air itself. On the deck, the cold had taken a clearer shape, a presence that gently declared itself. The snowflakes were heavier now, not fierce, but more certain, as if they had decided to settle and stay. They landed on his coat and hat, and did not vanish quite so quickly, lingering as tiny stars before yielding to warmth. He walked to the rail again and looked down. The water no longer seemed to flow in smooth, dark folds. Instead, it had a dull sheen, a muted quietness that looked almost solid. Along the hull, in the narrow strip of sea touched by the ship's warmth and motion, the ice still broke and crumbled with each forward push. Just beyond that narrow path, however, the surface glimmered with a loose gathering of ice, fragile but growing. Below, deep in the heart of the ship, the engine answered the changing sea. The strong, confident beat that had driven them steadily forward all day began to slow, each stroke drawn out a little longer, each revolution more thoughtful. Orders traveled from bridge to engine room, carried in the clear, practical language of bells and shouted words. But by the time they reached Anders' ears, everything had been softened by distance and steel. He did not need to hear the instructions to understand their meaning. The ship was being gentled, her speed eased, as one slows a horse whose hooves meet uncertain ground. There was no abruptness in it, no jolt, only a gradual settling into a slower rhythm. High above, the funnel's voice changed as well. The strong, steady column of smoke that had poured out earlier thinned became lighter, more like mist than smoke, drifting away in long, soft ribbons. The sound too softened, the deep, insistent breath of the engine turning into a quieter exhale. The ship's motion was still forward, still sure, but now it felt as though she was gliding rather than driving, as if the sea had turned from an open road into a delicate hallway of glass, where every step must be taken with care. The snow gathered upon the rails, on the coil of ropes, on the tops of bollards and chocks, rounding their sharp edges and making them all look gentle, as if the ship were being wrapped in white wool. Lanterns along the deck were lit one by one, the steward watching as the sailors moved from bracket to bracket, breathing life into each small flame. The glass panes, once clear, now caught flecks of snow that clung to their surfaces. But the light within remained warm and steadfast. Seen from a distance, the steamship must have looked like a moving constellation on the dark water, its lanterns and windows glowing golden against the white veil of the storm. Inside the ship, dusk deepened into evening, and the passengers felt the change as a subtle alteration in the world around them. Some looked up, puzzled, when the motion beneath their feet shifted from the familiar steady roll to something quieter and more contained. The faint vibration of speed lessened, replaced by a more leisurely, almost thoughtful tremor. It felt as though the ship had begun to take longer breaths, exhaling slowly between each surge forward. There was nothing in it that suggested danger or alarm. It was simply different, like the difference between walking quickly along a road and strolling, hands in pockets, while snow begins to fall. In the main saloon, lamps had been lit even before the last daylight faded. Their light spread in soft pools across tables and along the polished woodwork, making every shadow gentle rather than sharp. The pianist had returned to his bench, coaxed by a few quiet requests. And now he played something slow and unhurried, a melody without words that drifted from note to note like snowflakes settling on still water. Here and there, passengers lifted their heads at the slight change in the ship's movement, met each other's eyes, and then relaxed again as nothing more happened. They trusted the vessel, the crew, and the familiar ways of winter seas. Anders stepped into the saloon, pausing near the doorway to let his eyes travel over the room. He saw a man in a wool suit polishing his spectacles with calm, methodical movements, a young woman folding and refolding a handkerchief in her lap, a child asleep in a chair, head tipped sideways against her mother's arm. The sound of the piano wrapped itself around them all, a soft ribbon of sound that made the room feel like the inside of a cocoon. He watched for any sign of unease, any restless movements, but found none. The passengers felt what he felt, a slowing, a gentle adjustment, but no reason to fear. He moved along the corridor that led toward the grand staircase and paused by a porthole, wiping the inner glass with the edge of his sleeve. Beyond the round frame, the world was a blurred wash of gray and white, the snow coming now in thicker clusters that tumbled past the glass. When the wind shifted, he could see the water below, mottled with floating ice. It gathered like lily pads in a winter pond, their edges delicate and translucent. Every so often, the ship's bow sent a shiver through them, breaking them apart, and he could almost imagine the soft, tinkling sound they would make if heard up close. Up on the bridge, hidden from the passenger's view, the captain stood with his shoulders squared, gaze steady on the spectral outline of the harbor ahead. From time to time, a faint glow appeared in the mist, the reflection of a lighthouse beam or a harbor light seen through gauze. Orders went down to reduce speed further, to test the growing skin of ice that was forming under the bow. The crew obeyed with the quick, practiced movements of men who knew their ship well. Their efficiency, their calm, and the measured tone of their voices traveled down through metal and air, settling like a silent reassurance over every deck. Down by the forward hatch, Anders spoke again with the young sailor posted there. The boy's cheeks were pink with cold, but his eyes were bright and alert. "Ice now, steward," he said softly. "You can hear it, sometimes, at the bow, like something being gently snapped." Anders listened. In the hush between wind and engine, there was indeed a faint, delicate sound, as though a giant hand were folding thin sheets of glass just beyond hearing. It was not harsh, nor loud, only an occasional crisp whisper. "The ship has known ice before," Anders replied, in his calm, even voice. "She will move carefully, and so will we. Keep watch, and if you need a warmer coat, ask for one. There is no sense in shivering." The young sailor smiled, a little shyly. "I am well, sir," he said. "It's beautiful, really, out there." Anders nodded, understanding. Yes, it is. Rounding his way back to the promenade, he stepped once more into the open air. Night had now fully settled, but it was not a deep, black night. The snow and cloud combined to make the sky a soft, luminous gray, as if some hidden lantern were burning behind the veil. The faint outline of the shoreline was almost lost, but here and there a brighter point of light shone steadily, a fixed star guiding them toward the harbor. The ship's lanterns and deck lights met those distant points, light answering light. In the falling snow, their beams seemed to expand, turning the immediate air around the ship into a golden mist. The railings glistened with a fine layer of ice, not yet thick but present, catching the light and turning it into threads of quiet silver. Passengers who stepped onto the deck were met with that gentle, glowing world. Some stayed only a moment, surprised by the hush and the way the snow swirled in the lamplight, then retreated back to the warmth with soft exclamations. Others lingered, standing near the rail or walking slowly from one end of the deck to the other, speaking very little, as though words might disturb the fragile beauty around them. Their footprints marked the snow in looping paths, then slowly filled in again as more flakes settled from above. Anders walked past them, a quiet guardian in his dark coat, checking that no one ventured too close to slick patches near the rail, that scarves were snug and hands gloved. He did it gently, with a soft word here, a slight gesture there, never brusque, never stern. The night did not need sharpness, it needed steadiness, warmth, and the sense that someone was paying attention. He felt the ship beneath him, moving even more slowly now, each advance through the thickening water deliberate and careful. He knew that soon, perhaps sooner than anyone expected, there would be a decision to pause, to wait where the sea held them and the harbor lay just out of reach. For now, though, the steamship continued her graceful, measured progress into the snow, her hull pressing through, forming ice, her lanterns casting golden halos in the mist. She moved like a living thing that understood the language of winter, answering cold with warmth, darkness with light, uncertainty with calm. And all the while, in her long, quiet body, the passengers and crew lived their small, tender moments, wrapped in wool and lamplight, and the soft, silver hush of a Christmas Eve at sea. The moment when the ship truly yielded to the ice came so quietly that, for many on board, It passed at first without notice. The change had been preparing itself for some time, unfolding as gently as the falling snow. The water had thickened by degrees, its restless surface smoothing into a dull, slow-moving plain. The faint tinkling at the bow, where ice plates met the hull, had grown into a more continuous murmur, like porcelain gently touched together again and again. To Mr. Anders, walking the familiar circuit from deck to saloon and back, it was as if the sea were slowly laying down a firm, white hand, asking the ship to rest for a while. He felt the final settling not in any sudden jolt, but in the absence of something. The engine, which had been beating with long, deliberate strokes, allowed one last, drawn-out turn, and then fell still. The faint vibration that had threaded through the floors and bulkheads all day softened, withdrew, and finally became no more than a memory in the wood and steel. The ship did not shudder or lurch. She simply ceased to move, like a creature that has found a comfortable hollow and curled into it. Outside, the hull eased into the cradle of frozen water, and the ice received her with a soft, muted sigh. For a moment, there was a deep hush everywhere, a pause that seemed to touch even the snow and the wind. Passengers who had grown used to the quiet thrum beneath their feet looked up at one another, sensing the change, their thoughts shifting but not yet formed into questions. In the corridors, a steward stopped with his tray halfway to a cabin door. In the galley, a cook paused with his ladle above a pot. Even in the crew's quarters, where men were shrugging into coats and boots, conversation faltered for the space of a slow breath. It was as if the ship and all within it were listening together for what would come next. Then the familiar sounds of routine returned, altered but reassuring. Footsteps in the passage, a door opening on the bridge, a voice calling down a speaking tube. Orders traveled with calm precision, no urgency in them, only the steady clarity of well-practiced command. The mask of snow and ice outside might be strange, but the response within the ship was not. Men moved to their assigned stations, checked lines and anchors, tested the stiffness of the frozen sea. From time to time, a small shiver ran through the hull as the ice creaked and adjusted to the ship's weight. But even that sound was gentle, like an old house settling deeper onto its foundations. It was not long before a different voice filled the corridors, carried through the speaking tubes, and echoed along the ceilings of the public rooms. The captain's tone, usually reserved for the bridge and the officers, now reached every deck in a measured, comforting murmur. Anders, standing at the foot of the grand staircase, listened as the words spread through the ship like a warm blanket. The captain explained that the ice in the outer harbor had grown too thick for safe passage in the darkness and snow. The engines had been stopped so that the ship might rest securely where she was, held softly in the frozen water. They would wait until morning light and the help of harbor tugs to guide them in. There was no danger, he repeated. The hull was strong, the ice was kind and steady, and the ship would be, for this one night, a safe and welcoming house upon the sea. Tonight, the voice said, calm and sure, this ship is our home. We will be warm. We will be together. We will wait for the morning. The words spread into every corner, into the saloon where passengers looked up from their chairs, into the narrower corridors of second class, where mothers held children closer into the small cabins with their narrow beds and polished washstands. People glanced at one another, reading the same message in each other's faces. The news might have seemed strange on any other night, but on this snowy Christmas Eve, it carried a curious, restful enchantment. They would not hurry through the harbor to scattered lodgings and cold platforms. Instead, they would stay together inside the warm, lamplit body of the ship, suspended in the quiet middle of the frozen bay. Anders watched how the announcement settled in the air. There was no rising of alarm, no flutter of voices. Rather, there was a low hum of talk, compressed and gentle, like the murmur that follows a blessing. Some passengers smiled outright, relieved to hear the captain's assurance of safety. Others sighed, resigned to the delay, but already adjusting their minds to a night on board. The children, sensing in the mood of the adults that nothing was truly wrong, accepted the idea with the natural ease of the young. A little boy declared in a hushed voice that they were now living in a floating house of lights, and his sister nodded solemnly, as if this had been obvious from the start. The ship itself began to feel different to Anders as he resumed his slow, thoughtful rounds. Without the vibration of the engine, the decks and walls seemed to rest more deeply, like muscles relaxing after a day of labor. The familiar list of the ship as she moved through waves was gone, replaced by a soft, almost imperceptible stillness. There was still a gentle, occasional sway, a faint lilt when the ice shifted and the trapped water moved beneath, but it was small and cradling, more like a rocking chair than a rolling sea. Snow tapped lightly at the portholes and skylights, the tiny impacts sounding like a quiet, irregular rain. Now and then the ice itself spoke in a low, distant crackle, the sound traveling along the metal hull in thin, silvery threads. Inside, the air had its own tender fragrance. It carried hints of coal heat from the boiler rooms, a mellow warmth that rose up through the decks and kept the chill at bay. It mingled with the soaps and polishes used on brass rails and wooden paneling, with the faint lavender and starch of freshly laundered linens, and with the domestic smells of the galley. Bread that had been baked earlier in the day, a lingering sweetness from pudding cooked for the evening meal. Together, these scents wove into something that was not quite the smell of a house, and not quite the smell of a ship, but a gentle marriage of both. Anders breathed it in and felt, as the captain had said, that the vessel had become a home for the night. He paused outside a row of cabins, listening to the muffled sounds that came through the doors. Low conversation, a laugh quickly softened, the creak of bed springs under settling bodies. In one cabin, a child's voice asked a question, and a parent answered in a tone so calming that even the words themselves seemed unimportant. It was the sound that mattered, the smooth flow of reassurance. Someone hummed a snatch of a carol under their breath, the melody drifting into the corridor in a few shy notes before falling silent again. The very walls seemed to hold these sounds with care, like cupped hands gently keeping a small flame from the wind. In the main saloon, the piano stood open once more, a lamp placed on top of it, casting a warm circle of light across the keys. A man in a dark suit sat at the bench, his fingers moving slowly over a familiar hymn, though he played it softly, as if not to disturb anyone who had chosen sleep. A few passengers remained awake in the chairs near him, listening in peaceful quiet. The elderly couple whom Anders had spoken to earlier now sat even closer together, their coats unbuttoned, hands folded loosely in their laps. They spoke very little. Their eyes wandered at times to the portholes, where only a pale blur could be glimpsed. The snow-covered night pressed against the glass, yet there was no longing in their gaze, only a calm acceptance that this night had chosen its own way. As he walked, Anders found that his own thoughts shifted subtly. He no longer counted the hours until docking, no longer measured the distance in miles or knots. Instead, he began to think in terms of rooms and lamplight, of blankets and warmth. The decks became hallways, the staircases, the stairwells of a large, hospitable house. The cabins were bedrooms, each with his or her own corner of comfort. The saloons and lounges were sitting rooms, meant for quiet conversation and shared rest. Even the galley, with its clatter and steam, took on the feeling of a kitchen in some big country home, where many guests had unexpectedly stayed the night and must be fed with whatever simple, hearty fare could be found. Near the aft, he paused by a small porthole at the end of a corridor and looked out. The world beyond was a hushed, luminous field. The ice lay flat and pale under the snow, stretching in every direction like a blank, endless sheet. Here and there, faint lines and fractures marred its surface, delicate cracks that caught what little light there was and turned it into threads of silver. Over all lay the soft, continuous descent of snow, covering sea and sky alike in quiet whiteness. The distant town lights were almost entirely hidden now, their glow reduced to a faint, faraway haze. It did not matter. Inside the ship, the light was sufficient. Turning away from the window, Anders ran his hand along the smooth wooden rail of the corridor. It felt solid and familiar under his gloved palm, like the banister of a house he had lived in for many years. He pictured the ship as a great, dark house resting in the middle of a frozen meadow, its windows bright, its chimney smoking into the winter sky. Around it, the snow fell and fell, soft and indifferent. But within its walls, there was warmth and company. It was a curious image, but it soothed him. The sea, which in other seasons and other storms could be a wild and restless neighbor, had tonight become a quiet, white garden in which the ship stood peacefully still. He resumed his quiet circuit, watching, listening, making small adjustments where they were needed. A door eased more tightly closed to keep out a draft. A lamp trimmed so its flame would not sputter. A word of reassurance offered to a passenger who stood for a moment too long in thought. His presence itself was part of the comfort the ship offered. He moved as he always did, without haste, with the calm assurance of someone who knew every corner and sound of this floating home. To those who noticed him, he was like a familiar figure in a household, the one who checks the locks and banked fires before everyone else sleeps. Outside, the ice held the hull in a gentle grip, and the snow stroked the ship's sides with countless small, cold fingers. Inside, the lights glowed steadily, the carpets softened footsteps, and the air remained warm. The captain's words lingered in the minds of all who had heard them. The ship is safe. The ship is strong. Tonight, the ship is our house. In that thought, there was comfort enough to lay many worries down. And so, as the night deepened and the harbor lay hidden beyond the frozen veil, the steamship ceased to be simply a vessel on a journey and became, instead, a quiet, welcoming dwelling suspended above the sleeping sea. Within her walls, people settled into their temporary rooms, wrapped themselves in blankets, and let their breathing slow. The journey would continue when morning came. For now, the world outside could be snow and ice and silence. Inside, there was warmth, light, and the soft, watchful presence of a house at rest. Once the decision had settled over the ship, and the words, "Tonight, this ship is our home," had been carried to every corner, a new kind of work began, quiet and purposeful. It was not the labor of travel any longer, not the measured routines of speed and distance, but the softer work of comfort. Orders passed, not in sharp commands, but in low, steady voices. More blankets to the upper decks, more lamps to the corridors, far from the saloons, hot drinks for those who wished to stay awake a while longer. The steamship, so recently a moving engine of iron and steam, now turned inward like a house at evening, drawing in its warmth and tending to its people. In the linen room, where shelves of folded goods lined the walls like the pages of a great white book, Anders stood shoulder to shoulder with two younger stewards as they lifted armfuls of woolen blankets from their neat piles. The blankets were thick and reassuringly heavy, with a faint, clean scent of soap and sun from their last airing. Reds, browns, and soft grays lay stacked together, colors that looked particularly kind in lamplight. Each bundle was hugged close, then passed to waiting arms, strips of twine looped loosely around them for easier carrying. No one rushed. The motion of lifting and stacking and passing had its own soothing rhythm, as if they were arranging layers of warmth in preparation for a long, peaceful sleep. From the linen room, the blankets fanned outward along the ship's vanes. Anders led one group himself, cradling a stack against his chest as he walked down the main corridor. Behind him came a sailor and another steward, similarly laden. They went methodically, door by door, their knuckles tapping gently before each knob turned. When the doors opened, faces appeared in the frames, surprised at first, then quietly pleased as they understood the purpose of this late-hour visit. Some passengers had already donned their own coats or shawls, prepared to sleep in whatever extra covering they had brought. For them, the ship's blankets were an unexpected kindness, one more layer between their bodies and the winter pressed against the hull. Anders spoke very little, but when he did, his voice was as soft and even as always. "We thought you might like an extra blanket for the night," he would say, with a slight inclination of his head. "It may be colder than usual by morning, but we will keep the ship as warm as we can." Sometimes there was a brief question, a murmur of thanks, a smile that lingered after the door closed. In one cabin, a child stretched both arms eagerly toward the folded wool, declaring that this must be a Christmas blanket from the ship, and the parents laughed, their earlier fatigue melting into something easier. In another, a solitary man in a worn coat accepted the blanket in silence, his eyes shining more brightly than his words could. Anders did not linger. He understood that comfort could also mean allowing quiet to return. At the same time, below decks, the heart of the ship's warmth beat more gently but more widely. In the galley, the cooks, who had already prepared and served the evening meal, turned their attention to simple, sustaining things. A large pot of soup, modest but fragrant, simmered steadily on the stove, its surface stirred now and then by a patient hand. Potatoes, carrots, and barley floated in a mild broth, releasing a homely, reassuring scent that seeped into the surrounding passages. Beside it, another kettle brimmed with milk, warming slowly, the surface trembling with each small bubble that dared to rise. Into that milk went chocolate, sugar, and a touch of spice, stirred until it thickened into a rich, velvety cocoa that seemed to give off warmth even before it was poured. The galley's light was soft and yellow, catching on the edges of tin mugs and enamel bowls lined up along the counter. A younger cook, sleeves rolled high, ladled soup into one tureen after another, preparing to send it up to the public rooms where those still awake might gather. Another filled rows of mugs with cocoa, the steam rising in delicate white threads that curled and vanished into the air. Their movements were efficient, but there was a gentleness in them, too. This was the kind of work that belonged to winter evenings, feeding people not out of obligation, but out of an instinctive desire to warm, to soothe, to send them to rest with something hot in their hands and stomachs. From the galley, stewards and sailors set out with trays and baskets, their loads clinking softly with a touch of metal on metal. Anders met one such party at the foot of the staircase leading up to the main saloon. To the lounge and the second-class dining room first, he suggested in his low, steady tone. After that, we will see who is still awake in the smaller rooms. Walk slowly and watch your step. The floors may be damp from snow on shoes. The men nodded, and together they ascended, carrying with them the sense of soup and cocoa, of warmth in liquid form. In the lounges, the transformation continued in small but significant ways. Oil lamps were brought out from storage, their brass bases polished, and their glass chimneys cleaned until they shone faintly even before the flames were lit. Anders himself took a match to several of them, cupping his hand around each small wick as it caught, flared, and then settled into a calm, steady glow. The lamps were placed upon tables and sideboards, their light joining that of the fixed wall fixtures, thickening the golden haze that filled the rooms. Shadows softened at the edges, chairs and faces took on a gentler definition, and the corners that might have seemed dim now looked inviting, instead, like quiet alcoves in an old house. Passengers drifted toward these centers of warmth, drawn by both the light and the aromas that now filtered through the ship. Some came with books in hand, intending only to sit a while longer under the lamps before returning to their cabins. Others came because the thought of staying awake with others, sharing the strange pause of the journey, seemed more comforting than sleeping alone. They took their seats in low-backed chairs or along cushioned benches, their movements slow and unhurried, as if already half adapted to the dreamlike quality of the night. When the trays of soup arrived, the room filled briefly with the gentle clink of spoons and the quiet murmur of appreciation. No one feasted or reveled. There was no loud talk or clamor. Instead, each bowl became a small, personal hearth, sending up its own circle of steam and warmth, hands wrapped around mugs of cocoa, fingers soaking in the heat, the scent of chocolate and milk rising in soft waves. Every sip seemed to anchor those who drank it more firmly in the present moment. In this particular ship, on this particular night, held safely in ice, while snow fell in delicate silence outside. Anders moved among them, watching without intruding. He saw how shoulders, once tense with the anticipation of arrival, began to ease. Coats slipped from backs of chairs, scarves were unwrapped and laid over laps, hats placed on tables. People settled into their seats as they might have settled before a familiar fireplace at home. The piano, once again opened, now stood idle, yet in the hush of the room, no one seemed to miss the music. The ship itself provided its own quiet soundtrack. The occasional faint crackle of ice far below, the whisper of wind skimming along the hull, the very soft creaks and sighs of timbers at rest. Beyond the more formal lounges, in narrower corridors and smaller sitting rooms, the same quiet work of warmth continued. In a second-class parlor, where the furnishings were plainer but no less thoughtfully arranged, lamps were lit and blankets were draped across the backs of chairs so that anyone who wished might pull one around their shoulders. A steward placed a large pot of tea on a sideboard, surrounded by cups that soon found their way into grateful hands. The hum of conversation here was low, made up of simple remarks about the weather, the beauty of the snow, the unusual stillness of the ship. It was as if the delay had taken away not only movement, but also the need for complicated words. Even in the working spaces of the crew, the night's new character was felt. In the sailor's mess, a lantern swung gently from a beam, throwing its circle of light over men who sat in their shirt sleeves, cradling mugs of cocoa or tea. The talk was subdued, often turning to memories of other winters at sea, other times when ice had slowed their passage but never stopped their journey. Laughter, when it came, was soft, quickly folded back into quiet. They knew that they would be called upon in the morning to help free the ship, to work with tugs and lines and ice. For now, they rested, warmed by the knowledge that their vessel lay snug and secure in the frozen water. The ship kept warm in more ways than the obvious. Heat flowed from the boiler rooms through pipes and radiators, yes, and fires glowed behind iron doors in stoves and ovens, but warmth also traveled along other paths, through the soft clink of a ladle against the side of a pot, through the muffled footsteps of stewards hurrying with blankets, through the shared silence of people who had accepted that the night would be a little different and perhaps gentler than they had planned. It moved in the slight, unconscious way a passenger shifted closer to a stranger on a settee, not touching, but sharing space, or in the quiet exchange of a smile over the rims of two mugs. By the time Anders made his second slow circuit of the main decks, the transformation was complete. The ship no longer felt like a halted machine or a waylaid conveyance. It felt, simply and deeply, like a house that had opened all its rooms for the night. Every corridor glowed with small lights. Every public space held people in varying stages of wakefulness, some talking softly, some lost in their own thoughts, some already nodding into an easy doze. The cabins behind closed doors sheltered those who had chosen to rest early. their beds now layered with blankets that held the day's warmth. In the galley, the pots simmered gently on low flames, ready to offer another cup, another bowl, should anyone wake later in need of comfort. Outside, the snow continued its gentle descent, wrapping the frozen harbor in a thicker, softer mantle. The ice cradled the hull without malice, firm but benign. Above, the sky was a pale, luminous gray, the moon a blurred lantern behind drifting veils. Inside, within the black hull and behind the many small, glowing windows, the ship's people sat and sipped and eventually slept, surrounded by blankets, kettles, and small, bright flames that promised, without words, that the long winter night would be kind. By the time the extra blankets had been given out and the last of the soup and cocoa had begun to cool in its pots, the ship's main lounge had taken on the settled air of a room that expected to be occupied for a long, quiet evening. Lamps burned with a deep, steady glow, their wicks trimmed just enough to hold a golden flame without flicker. The stove at the far end of the room, a compact iron thing surrounded by a low brass rail, pulsed with a gentle warmth that spread in slow waves across the polished floor. Outside the portholes, the world was pale and formless. Only a blurred whiteness where snow and ice and sky blended into one another. Inside, everything was clear and soft, each chair and table and folded coat resting in its place, as if it had always belonged there. Mr. Anders moved quietly through the lounge, feeling the room settle around him like a blanket. The passengers who had chosen to stay awake a while longer sat in loose clusters, not in tight knots of conversation, but in small, lightly connected constellations. Some had drawn their chairs a little closer to the stove, forming a crescent of faces turned toward its soft glow. Others remained nearer the windows, where now and then a faint shadow of the outside world appeared, a passing flurry of thicker snow, the dim suggestion of ice pressed against the glass, the soft reflection of the ship's own lanterns turned back upon them. No one spoke loudly. Voices rose and fell in low, even tones that merged easily with the faint crackle from the fire and the distant, slow sighs of the ship resting in the ice. On a small table near the center of the room, a tray of cups and a pot of cocoa still stood, attended by a young steward who moved with careful, silent efficiency. Each time someone lifted a hand in a slight gesture, he came forward, filling their cup, murmuring a word or two, then withdrawing again so as not to disturb the gentle spacing of the evening. The rich, sweet scent of chocolate hung in the air, mingling with the faint tang of coal from the stove and the quieter perfumes of wool and clean linen. It was a homely fragrance, the sort that belonged equally well to a farmhouse kitchen or a city parlor, and it made the ship feel less like a vessel far from land and more like a temporary village floating in its own self-contained world. Near the stove sat the elderly couple whom Anders had noticed earlier in the day. They had left their heavier coats on the backs of their chairs, revealing plain but carefully mended clothing, the kind that spoke of modest means and long use. The man's silver beard caught the lamplight, making a soft halo at his jaw, while his wife's hair, drawn back into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, gleamed faintly where a few strands escaped to frame her face. Their hands lay close together on the armrest between them, not quite clasped, but touching at the edges, as if the years had taught them that even the lightest contact could be enough. They spoke now and then, quietly and easily, as people do who have long shared the same memories. Anders paused a short distance away, not to intrude, but to let his presence be known if they should need anything. He heard the man say, in that soft, worn voice that comes with age, "Do you remember the year the river froze right up to the bridge? We walked across it as if it were a road." His wife smiled, the expression gentle and slow. "Yes," she replied. "You carried the lantern." We walked very carefully. The air was so still that we could see the stars reflected in the ice. They sat quietly for a while, each surely seeing that winter in their minds. The starry ice, the faint light swinging between them, the careful steps, the present evening, with its snow-touched windows and its resting ship, must have felt like an echo of that time. When Anders stepped closer and asked in a low tone whether they would like a little more cocoa, they both nodded, their thanks soft but clear. As he poured, the old man looked up at him with mild eyes. "We have found ourselves in another winter story tonight," he said. "A gentle one, I think." Anders inclined his head. "Yes, sir," he replied. "A gentle one." At a table near the back of the lounge, where the lamplight was softer and the shadows deeper, sat a man in a city coat, the collar still faintly marked by melted snow. His leather satchel rested on the floor by his chair, its clasp carefully shut as if it held something precious. Though Anders suspected that inside were only papers, ledgers, and perhaps a few tightly folded letters, the man's face bore the tired, slightly pinched look of someone accustomed to long days and late trains. His hands thin and ink-stained, he had eaten little at supper, taking most of his nourishment in the form of coffee and silence. But now, with the ship stopped and the evening altered, he seemed to have let a small piece of his vigilance go. Anders approached him with the same quiet courtesy he gave everyone. "May I bring you something hot, sir?" he asked. The man looked up as if waking from a shallow sleep, then gave a short, apologetic smile. "Yes," he said, "some cocoa would be very welcome." When Anders returned with the steaming cup, he lingered for just a moment, noticing the way the man's shoulders eased as he wrapped his hands around it. "We will remain here until morning," Anders said in a low, reassuring tone. "The ship is very warm. If you would prefer to rest here instead of your cabin, there are blankets available." The man nodded, his eyes dropping to the cup. "Thank you," he murmured. After a pause, as if the words had been waiting inside him all day, he added, "I was meant to arrive home by midnight. I had thought of walking from the station and seeing the lights in the windows, but now," he trailed off, then gave a little shrug. "Now, perhaps they will keep a candle burning longer for me." There was no bitterness in his voice, only a gentle acceptance, as though the picture in his mind had shifted but not broken. "Sometimes," Anders replied quietly. "A longer wait makes the arrival feel even warmer." He did not say more. There was no need. The man's gaze drifted to the nearest porthole, where snow pressed softly against the glass in feathery patterns, and Anders moved on, leaving him with his cup, his thoughts, and the steady, quiet company of the room. In another corner of the lounge, near a small bookcase where a few worn volumes leaned companionably together, a young sailor stood awkwardly with a mug of cocoa in his hands. He had been sent up from the crew's quarters to fetch news of any further needs among the passengers, but finding none urgent, he lingered for a moment on the edge of the soft murmur. His uniform was plain and practical, his hair a little damp still from work on deck, and there was a look in his eyes that spoke of somewhere else, a low farmhouse perhaps, or a village street lined with bare trees. Anders noticed him and crossed the room in his unhurried way. "You may sit a while," Anders said, his tone kind but matter-of-fact. "We will come and tell you if the officers require you." The young man smiled, almost shyly. "Thank you, steward," he answered. "It's different, seeing the lounge like this, sir. It feels very calm." He glanced toward the portholes, where the whiteness of the night pressed gently against the glass. "Reminds me of when the pond at home froze, and we would all sit by the stove afterward, with our boots drying." His voice softened on the last words, and for a moment he seemed far away, in that warm, familiar room with the smell of wood smoke and wet wool. "A good memory," Anders said, following the thought without asking for more. "You can keep it close tonight. The ship will look after you until morning." The young sailor nodded, his fingers tightening slightly around the mug, as if it were the handle of some cherished cup from his childhood. "Yes, sir," he murmured. "It does feel that way, like it's looking after us." The stories in the lounge that night were all of this sort. Small, gentle, woven not from drama, but from quiet recollection. No one told grand tales of peril or adventure. Instead, memories of other winters surfaced in soft fragments. Someone spoke of the sound of church bells ringing through snow, each note made rounder and more peaceful by the cold air. Another person mentioned the smell of evergreen boughs in a farmhouse hall, hung there to dry and to lend their resinous perfume to the room. A woman described the way frost had grown on her childhood bedroom window in elaborate silver patterns, so intricate that she had imagined a patient artist at work there each night. The listeners did not respond with exclamations or questions. They simply smiled or nodded or added a quiet yes, as if recognizing something of their own lives in each small scene. From time to time, someone rose and walked softly to the portholes, pressing a hand lightly against the cold glass. The view did not change much, yet it seemed to invite contemplation. The ice lay close to the hull, its surface a pale mosaic of plates and cracks, now softened by snow. Beyond, nothing distinct could be seen, only the gentle haze of the storm, lit from within by the ship's own reflected glow. It was as if the steamship floated in a peaceful dream, surrounded not by harsh wilderness, but by a soft, endless field of white. Those who looked out tended to linger a moment, breathing slowly, then return to their chairs with a deeper calm. Gradually, the room itself seemed to sway into a kind of collective drowsiness. The stove's warmth deepened, sinking gently into walls and floor and skin. The cocoa in the cups turned lukewarm, then cool, forgotten in hands that rested more loosely in laps. The lamplight grew thicker, not dimmer, but more velvety, wrapping itself around faces and shoulders like a shawl. Words became fewer, pauses longer. A man who had been speaking about a long-ago Christmas market in a distant city found his story tapering off, not because it lacked an ending, but because the quiet of the room seemed to offer an ending of its own. And through it all, Anders moved with the same unhurried step, his presence a steady thread running through the fabric of the evening. He adjusted a lamp here, shifted a screen there to shield someone from a faint draft, lifted a forgotten cup from the floor before it could be tipped. He did not need to ask whether people were comfortable. He could see it in their posture, in the way their eyes half closed, in the way their shoulders had slipped down from around their ears. The lounge had become not just a public room, but a kind of common hearth, a peaceful chamber in the great black house of the ship. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and steady, its flakes drifting like silver feathers through the dim air. The ice held the hull with a quiet, patient strength. Above the clouds, unseen stars shone in their distant, waking sky. Inside, under the curved ceiling and between the warm, lamplit walls, people let their guards fall slowly away, sharing gentle stories until speech itself grew unnecessary. The steamship, resting in the frozen harbor, listened with them, its metal bones at ease, its wooden panels sighing faintly as if in contentment. It was a night of small words and long silences, of soft remembrance and simple companionship, the kind of night that passes lightly across the mind and leaves behind a calm, silver trace, like a remembered dream. Later in the evening, when the lounge had grown quieter and the stories there were drifting toward silence, Anders resumed his slow circuit of the ship. It was the habit of many years to walk the decks and corridors as the night deepened, to let his eyes rest on doors and lamps and stairwells, to listen for any sound that might ask for his attention. Tonight, the task felt gentler than usual, more like walking through a house where most of the family had already fallen asleep. The air in the main passageways was warm and faintly scented with cocoa and coal, and the lights in the sconces seemed to burn lower, as if in sympathy with the drowsiness that lay over the ship. He moved first along the main deck corridor, his footsteps soft on the carpet runner. Behind the closed doors, he heard only small, peaceful sounds. The creak of a bed as someone shifted under their blankets, the hushed cadence of a low voice finishing a final sentence, the brief sigh of a lamp being turned down. The ship itself added its own notes to this quiet music, a faint, far-off crackle along the hull where the ice adjusted to the ship's settled weight, the delicate tap of snow against porthole glass, the occasional tiny click in a pipe, or fitting as warm air moved through cold metal. All of it together created a gentle, continuous murmur, like the breathing of a large, sleeping creature. At the far end of the corridor, where it narrowed slightly and curved toward the bow, there was a small, round window, half veiled by frost. Here, the air felt a little cooler, as if some trace of the outside cold had managed to seep in and linger. Anders could see the faint plume of his own breath when he drew closer. It was there that he noticed the young sailor, the same one who had stood watch by the hatch earlier. The boy was leaning near the porthole, not quite touching it, his mug empty now, his cap pushed back so that a few curls of hair showed at his forehead. His posture had a stillness that did not quite belong to someone on duty. It was the kind of stillness that came when thoughts had slipped far away from the body. Anders stopped a few paces behind him and waited, not wanting to startle the boy from whatever quiet place he had found. From where he stood, he could see the sailor's reflection in the rim of frost along the glass, a faint outline, softened by the cold. The young man's eyes were turned outward, fixed on the pale expanse beyond, where the ice lay close and the snow fell in soft, slanting lines. For a time, they both simply stood there, the older man and the younger, listening to the quiet. The ship stirred once, a little shudder running through her as some piece of ice shifted and cracked beneath the hull. The sound traveled up through the metal and wood, emerging in the corridor as a delicate, faraway chime. It was not threatening, not harsh, only a reminder that outside their warm cocoon, the world was made of glassy water and frozen air. At last, Anders spoke, his voice low and even. "You see much from that window," he said. The sailor started just a little, then turned, his face flushing faintly as he recognized the steward. "Yes, sir," he answered, straightening at once. "I was just looking. The ice is very close here." Anders nodded and stepped nearer so they could stand side by side. Together, they looked out through the frosted glass. The ship's hull was pressed into what seemed a solid plane of white, though Anders knew it was a mosaic of plates and cracks, frozen and refrozen in layers. Where the hull's warmth met the ice, narrow channels of darker water showed through, like slender rivers winding in a pale field. Snow drifted down in steady, gentle curtains, softening every edge. "It is like a frozen road," Anders said quietly. "A quiet road that asks us to be still." The sailor's shoulders relaxed again, the tension leaving as quickly as it had come. "At home," he said after a pause, "we had a small pond at the edge of the fields. In winters like this, when it froze thick, my brothers and I would slide over it in our boots until our mother called us in. At night, we could hear the ice singing from the house. It would crack very softly with a sound like glass sighing." He hesitated, searching for the right word, then smiled a little in self-consciousness. It sounded like something alive. Anders listened, his gaze still turned outward. "Ice does have a voice," he replied. "Some nights it is sharp, some nights it is quiet. Tonight it is very gentle. It is holding us carefully, as if it knows we want rest." The boy's eyes drifted back to the world beyond the porthole, to the white plane that had become their unexpected bed. "I was meant to be home by tomorrow," he said, his tone not resentful, only thoughtful. "My mother said she would bake the big loaf with the sugar crust and keep it warm as long as she could. My father pretends not to care about such things, but he sits by the window when I am due to arrive, polishing his pipe. My youngest brother will stand outside in the yard, no matter how cold it is, just so he can be the first to see me on the lane." The images hung in the air between them, bright and simple. The warm loaf, the waiting window, the boy in the yard. They did not need to be described in more detail. Their very simplicity gave them weight. "You will still arrive," Anders said softly, "only a little later. And when you do, the bread will taste just as sweet, and the lane will be just as familiar. Tonight is another kind of visit. You are home here for a while." The sailor looked at him, brow furrowed. "Home, sir?" The word sounded strange on his tongue when applied to the ship, yet not entirely wrong. Anders gave a small shrug, the gesture easy and sure. "A temporary home," he said, "but a real one for this night. These corridors are our hallways. These rooms are sitting rooms. These cabins are bedrooms. The ship is at rest. We must only keep it warm and bright until morning." He watched the young man absorb this thought, saw the way it slowly softened the lines of his face. To be at home was, perhaps, less a matter of walls and roof, and more a matter of light and warmth and the presence of others. The steamship had all of these now, wrapped in the stillness of the frozen bay. "There is something you can do," Anders added after a moment, his voice quiet but firm, the way it became when he entrusted a task, a small duty, but an important one, especially when a ship becomes a house. The sailor straightened again, instinct responding to the note of responsibility. "Yes, sir," he said quickly. "What would you have me do?" Anders turned slightly, gesturing with a tilt of his head toward the line of lamps that ran along the corridor wall. Each hung in its bracket, glass chimney glowing softly, brass gleaming in the lamplight. They had been lit at the start of the evening, and their flames now burned with a low, steady light. "Tonight," Anders said, "these lamps are like the candles in a home's windows. They tell everyone that the house is awake, that it is watchful and welcoming. I would like you to be their keeper. Walk this corridor from end to end every so often. Check each lamp. If the flame is too high, turn it down. If it is too low, coax it gently up. Wipe away any soot from the glass. Make sure the light stays soft and clear." The boy looked along the row of lamps, as if seeing them properly for the first time. The task was not grand, not heroic, but it had a kind of quiet dignity that settled easily on his shoulders. "Yes, sir," he said, and there was warmth in his voice now. "I can do that." He stepped closer to the nearest lamp and examined it, reaching out carefully as Anders had taught all the younger crew. Steady hand, gentle touch, respect for flame and glass. Anders watched him adjust the wick by the slightest fraction, making the glow more even. "Good," he murmured. "You see how the light becomes calmer. Do the same for the others. Not too often. They do not like to be fussed over, but often enough that they know they are not forgotten." As the boy moved to the next lamp, Anders stepped back a little, letting him take up his new role. The sailor's homesickness had not vanished. Anders could see it still, a softness around the eyes, a slight inwardness in his gaze. But it had changed its tone, becoming less like an ache and more like a quiet longing that could sit peacefully beside duty. To tend the lamps was to tend the house. To tend the house was, in some small way, to tend the hearts inside it. The young man seemed to sense this, even if he could not have put it into words. Each lamp he adjusted became, for a moment, a candle in a familiar window, a little point of light that spoke of presence and care. They walked the corridor together once, from bow to stern and back again. The flames responded willingly to the careful hands, steadying, softening, offering their gentle, golden circles to the night. When they reached the frosted porthole again, Anders paused. Outside, the ice whispered once more, a faint, crackling sigh that ran along the hull and disappeared into the distance. The snow fell, steady and soft, turning the frozen sea into a smooth, silver dream. "Listen," Anders said. "Do you hear it? The ice is shifting a little, but not in anger. It is simply settling around us, like a blanket being smoothed." The young sailor listened, head tilted slightly, his face calm. "It really does sound like singing," he murmured, very far away, very quiet. "Yes," Anders agreed, "a quiet song for a quiet night." He rested a gloved hand briefly on the boy's shoulder, a simple, steadying touch. "You will keep the lights for us. I will walk elsewhere for a while and then return. If any lamp troubles you, if any flame will not behave, you may come and find me. But I think they will respond to you. They know when someone needs something peaceful to do." When he moved away, leaving the sailor alone with his row of lamps and the soft song of the ice, Anders felt a small sense of rightness. The ship was full of such small arrangements now. A blanket placed here, a pot kept warm there, a word of reassurance given at the right moment. Each was modest by itself, but together they formed a pattern of care that wrapped the ship as surely as the snow wrapped the frozen bay. The young sailor, walking slowly from lamp to lamp, was part of that pattern now. His homesickness, woven gently into the work of keeping watch, had become something quieter, something almost like a prayer. As the hours slipped by, the corridor remained softly lit, each lamp a golden bead on a long, still string. The sailor walked his small patrol, listening to the ice breathe and the ship sigh, feeling the presence of sleeping passengers behind the doors. Outside, the white world lay in deep, peaceful silence, the snow falling, the ice holding, the harbor waiting. Inside, the steamship remained warm and wakeful at its edges, its lights tended, its people cradled. And somewhere out beyond that frozen field, in a farmhouse where a mother checked the window and a father polished his pipe and a brother stood in the yard breathing little clouds into the air, a place waited for the young sailor's eventual return. For tonight, though, his home was here, in the lamplit corridor of the black-hulled ship, listening to the soft song of the sea of ice. As the night moved onward and the hours slid, almost unnoticed, toward the center of darkness, the steamship grew quieter in ways that were more felt than heard. The first drowsiness of evening had deepened into something more complete, more settled. Conversations that had lingered in the lounges now dwindled to a few scattered whispers, then to the gentle rustle of someone rising from a chair, the soft thud of a book being laid aside, the faint swish of fabric as coats were taken up and carried away. One by one, passengers withdrew to their cabins, leaving the public rooms to the lamplight and the low, steady warmth of the stoves. The ship, which earlier had held so many voices and footsteps, now seemed to be gathering itself inward, drawing a soft veil over its own sounds. In this growing hush, other music began to make itself known. It was not music in the usual sense, not yet, but a quiet pattern in the noises that remained. Anders, walking his unhurried rounds, noticed it first as a feeling rather than a thought. The faint creak of timber under his feet as he passed from one section of the deck to another, the distant sigh of wind slipping along the hull, the gentle, intermittent crackle of ice far below, all combined into something rhythmic and soothing. The ship no longer throbbed with the strong heartbeat of the engine. Instead, it breathed in long, slow intervals, a sleeping thing that still kept watch. Every so often, a small shiver ran through the metal bones of the vessel as the ice eased and resettled around it, and the sound traveled up through floors and bulkheads like the quietest of chimes. On the main deck, Where the corridor lamps glowed in a calm, continuous line, Anders paused to listen more closely. The young sailor he had given the duty of tending the lights was still at his post, moving with careful steps from lamp to lamp. The boy's presence had become a part of the ship's nightly music. The slight clink of glass as he touched a chimney, the barely audible scrape of a wick turned a fraction up or down, the soft, even cadence of his footfalls. When he saw Anders, he nodded, the gesture respectful, but now edged with a quiet ease. "They are burning well, sir," he said. "They like being watched." Anders smiled, a small, approving curve of the mouth. "Yes," he replied. "Lamps, like people, are steadier when they are not entirely alone." Leaving the corridor, he made his way back toward the main saloon, drawn by a sound that rose and fell with a different quality, a thread of tone that did not belong to pipes or metal or wood. As he approached, he realized what it was. The voice of a violin played softly, so softly that it might have been a memory rather than a present sound. The notes drifted through the open doorway like a faint silver ribbon, climbing and falling with gentle grace, never loud enough to startle, always gentle enough to soothe. It was the kind of playing that did not ask for attention, but rewarded it, the way a distant star over the sea might reward the eye that chose to seek it. Inside the saloon, most of the chairs were empty now. A few passengers remained, sitting in ones and twos, some with eyes closed, some watching the musician with the stillness of half-sleep. The lamps had been turned a little lower, their flames trimmed until they gave off a warm, dim glow that left the corners of the room in soft shadow. The stove's iron sides had dulled to a deep, even heat, no longer radiating strong waves of warmth, but holding the air at a comfortable, restful temperature. The violinist sat near the center of the room, not on a raised platform, but on an ordinary chair beside a small table where an empty cup and a folded handkerchief lay. He was a man of middle years, his hair receding slightly at the temples, his suit plain but well cared for. He had tucked his chin against the worn rest of the instrument, and his eyes were half closed as the bow moved slowly over the strings. The melody he played was simple, almost childlike in its clarity, but there was a deep tenderness in the way he shaped each phrase. The notes emerged one after another, spaced with care, never hurried, never forced. They seemed to find their way easily into the quiet of the room, where they floated and lingered, blending with the other sounds of the ship. When the bow drew a long, sustained tone, the faint creak of the hull seemed to answer it. When the tune descended into a gentle cadence, the soft tap of snow at the portholes fell into time with it. It was as though the metal bones of the vessel had found, in the violin's voice, a language they recognized. Anders stood near the doorway for a while, leaning lightly against the frame, letting the music wash over him. He watched the faces of those who listened. A woman with silver pins in her hair rested her cheek against her gloved hand, her gaze unfocused, her thoughts clearly far away. A young man, perhaps a student, sat with his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped loosely, his head bowed. He might have been praying, or simply drifting in the sweet blur between wakefulness and sleep. An older gentleman, his spectacles pushed up on his forehead, had let his eyes fall closed, the lines of his face smoothed by the soft light. The music did not demand anything from them. It only offered a gentle space in which to rest. When one tune ended, the violinist did not bow or look up for applause. Instead, he paused for a few breaths, allowing the last vibration of the strings to fade into the air. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the steady rhythm of the ship's quiet breathing, with the subtle movements of those listening, with the whisper of wind outside. Then he began another piece, this one hardly more than a lullaby. The melody rose and fell in small arcs, as if it had been born from the rocking of a cradle or the gentle swing of a lantern on a calm night. Anders found his own shoulders loosening, his breath falling into time with the slow, soothing pattern. In that moment, he sensed the ship herself responding. The timbers, long accustomed to groaning against waves and storms, now seemed to sigh contentedly, the small noises they made settling into harmony with the violin, the metal ribs and rivets, the pipes and rails, the machinery resting deep below, all held the memory of movement, of power and strain. Tonight, those memories lay quiet, softened by the cold embrace of the ice, by the warmth of the lamps, and by the gentle music threading through their stillness. It was as if the vessel, too, were being sung to sleep. After a while, Anders moved farther into the room, taking a place against the wall where he could still observe without becoming a focus of attention. From here, he could see the violinist's fingers, their slow precision as they pressed each string, and the almost imperceptible movements of the man's face as he responded to the sounds he drew forth. He noticed as well the subtle rise and fall of the listener's shoulders, breaths deepening as their bodies relaxed. One woman's head had slipped sideways, resting lightly against the chairback. A young couple near the porthole sat with their knees nearly touching, their hands on their laps, close but not quite linked, eyes half closed. It was not the stillness of boredom or impatience. It was the stillness of people who had allowed themselves, for just a while, to be entirely at rest. When the violinist finally lowered his instrument and let his hands fall into his lap, the room did not erupt into applause. Instead, there was a soft stirring, and then a few gentle, appreciative taps of fingertips against chair arms, a kind of subdued clapping that suited the hour. He opened his eyes fully then and gave a small, modest nod, more an acknowledgement of shared presence than a request for praise. He set the violin gently in its worn case, laid the bow beside it, and straightened slowly, stretching his fingers as though waking them from a long, pleasant nap. Anders stepped forward, speaking in that low, even tone that carried without insistence. "Thank you," he said. "The ship is quieter for your music." The man smiled faintly, a little surprised to be addressed so directly. "It seemed the right kind of night for playing," he replied. "The sound carries differently when everything else is so still. It is almost as if the walls are listening." "They are," Anders answered, with a small, knowing tilt of his head. "The walls, the floors, the rails, the beams. They listen, and they remember. You have given them something gentle to remember tonight." Gradually, the few remaining passengers rose from their chairs. Some murmured a word of thanks to the musician as they passed. Others simply smiled, their eyes warm, and made their way to the door with the unsteady, contented steps of people on the edge of sleep. Anders watched them go, offering a nod here, a soft good night there, guiding them lightly toward the staircases that would lead them back to their cabins. When at last the room was almost empty, he slipped around the tables, righting a chair that had been pushed askew, straightening a folded blanket on the back of a seat, lifting a forgotten cup from the floor. The lamps still burned, but they, too, seemed to be leaning toward rest, their flames small and steady, their glass chimneys faintly misted. Outside the saloon, the corridor lay in its calm brightness, the lamps tended by the young sailor still glowing with steady, golden light. Anders walked along it once more, listening as the music of the violin, though no longer played, seemed to linger in the metal and wood. The ship's own sounds rose to meet that memory. The slow, deep creak of her frame, the soft whisper of wind along the hull, the delicate, intermittent crackle of ice shifting far below. Together, they formed a quiet, invisible hymn sung to no one and to everyone at once. On the upper deck, snow still fell, veiling the world in silver quiet. The distant town remained hidden behind the winter mist, its lamps only a faint suggestion at the edge of sight. The ship, however, needed no outside light. She glowed from within, a long, low shape of black steel and golden windows resting peacefully in the frozen sea. Inside her, people slept in narrow beds and curled on cushioned seats, their dreams softened by the warmth of blankets, by the memory of shared stories, by the echo of music in the metal bones beneath them. As Anders made his final round before allowing himself a brief rest, he felt a deep, steady calm. The steamship, which by day was an engine of travel and noise, had become in this snowbound night a guardian, a quiet, watchful house upon the ice. Her lamps burned like stars along her corridors. Her stoves and pipes kept a gentle, protective heat flowing through her veins. Her creaks and sighs and distant crackles formed a lullaby that reached into every cabin and every corner. And somewhere within that lullaby, like a silver thread woven through dark wool, the memory of the violin's soft notes continued to sing, making the night even more peaceful, even more tender, as it carried the ship and all within her toward the first, faint hint of dawn. In the deep hours when night begins, almost imperceptibly, to loosen its hold, the steamship lay in a calm so complete that it felt like the center of a long, quiet dream. The lamps burned low in the corridors. Behind closed doors, breaths rose and fell in slow, even rhythm. The stoves kept their patient warmth, and the metal bones of the ship answered the cold outside with soft, contented sighs. Outside, the snow had continued its gentle work, settling in feather-light layers over ice and deck and rail, smoothing edges and filling crevices until everything in sight belonged to the same soft, white world. The storm that had seemed so determined to stay now began, very gradually, to thin, its dense veil turning lighter and more porous, as if the sky itself were growing curious about the world below. In his small cabin, not far from the forward stair, Anders woke before any bell called him, and before the ship stirred. His sleep had been light, a series of shallow, fading dreams in which corridors and waves and lamplight blended. He lay still for a few moments, listening in that practiced way he had learned over many years at sea. There was no throb of the engine, no rush of water along the hull, but he heard the quiet he had come to know during the night. The soft, scattered creaks of wood, the faint hiss of warmth in the pipes, the almost inaudible crackle where ice and steel met. Underneath everything, there was a new note now, so subtle he might have missed it had he not been trained to attend. The air itself seemed a little lighter, the silence less dense, as if somewhere above them a hidden curtain had been drawn aside to let in a different kind of breath. He rose and dressed without haste, buttoning his coat carefully, smoothing the collar as he always did, tying his scarf with a simple knot that had become second nature. When he opened his door, the corridor met him with a soft, amber glow. A few lamps still burned low, their flames very small but steady, watched over through the night by the young sailor. The boy himself sat now on a narrow bench at the far end, head bowed, eyes closed in a brief, unintentional doze. Anders did not wake him at once. He walked along the corridor in slow, quiet steps, peering at each lamp. The glass chimneys were clear, the brass warm to the touch, the flames obedient and calm. Only when he reached the sailor did he pause, laying a gentle hand on the young man's shoulder. The boy started, then blinked, embarrassment rising quickly to his face. "I am sorry, sir," he whispered, "just for a moment." Anders shook his head slightly. "It is nearly morning," he said. "You have done well. Go below and rest now. The lamps can begin to brighten soon, but not yet. Let the ship wake slowly." Drawn by an instinct he did not question, Anders climbed the forward stair to the open deck. The cold met him with a soft, immediate touch, not harsh, but clear and pure, like spring water held in cupped hands. He stepped out under the sky and stopped, letting the scene before him settle fully into his senses. The darkness had lifted into a wide, pale openness. The thick, snow-laden clouds that had pressed low over the ship all night were thinning, their edges soft and torn, revealing higher layers washed with delicate color. The horizon, which had been a simple wall of gray, now showed a faint, luminous band where the first light of morning gathered, a quiet, lingering blush of rose and gold spreading slowly along the distant line between sky and earth. The ice around the ship had changed with the coming of light. In the night, it had been a blank, white field, its details hidden beneath snow. Now, as the faint glow of dawn brushed it, the surface revealed its secret patterns. Lines of fracture traced delicate, branching paths through the frozen sheet, like silver threads sewn into pale cloth. Plates of ice overlapped and underlapped, some thick and opaque, others thin enough that the dark water below showed through in muted, bluish shadows. Here and there, where the ship's warmth and the slow, constant movement of the sea beneath had been most persistent, the ice had begun to loosen. Narrow channels gleamed damply, reflecting the soft sky in streaks of milky pink and gray. The steamship sat in the midst of this quiet, frozen garden like a dark tree rooted in snow. Snow lay along her rails and covered the tops of bollards and coils of rope, rounding their shapes into gentle mounds. Her funnel rose, black against the palening sky, and from its rim there now drifted only the faintest trace of smoke, a thin, almost transparent ribbon that stirred and spread in the cold air before disappearing. The windows along her sides still glowed dimly, the lights within softened by sleep and distance, turning each round pane into a small, warm coin set into the dark hull. Anders walked along the deck, his boots leaving clear, crisp prints in the fresh snow. The only other marks were those made in the night, now partly filled in. The footprints of passengers and crew, the tracks of boots where stewards had carried blankets and trays. All were softened, blurred, as if the storm had wished to erase the signs of movement and leave only stillness. He paused at the rail and looked out across the ice. The town, which had vanished entirely during the snowfall, now showed itself again in fragments. A weak, golden dot here, another there, and then, gradually, the faint outline of roofs and a steeple emerging from the mist. The harbor's lights seemed to be testing their own strength, not yet bright, but gently persistent. From somewhere below his feet, there came a new sound, still quiet, but different from the night's soft crackles. A subdued groan, a low, stretching murmur that ran along the hull. It was followed by a delicate chorus of snaps and pops, as though a sheet of glass had been scored and was now, carefully, beginning to split along its lines. The ice, touched by the first warmth of dawn and the subtle currents stirring beneath, was loosening its embrace. The ship shifted the smallest fraction, so little that the movement felt less like motion and more like a long, slow exhale. Anders steadied himself out of habit, though he did not truly need to. The vessel was not trying to break free alone. She was only adjusting to the change in her frozen cradle. He stood there for a time, watching the light gather and change. The pale band on the horizon deepened, its rose tint strengthening, then mellowing into a tender gold. The clouds above, once heavy and uniform, now showed layers and depth, some strips turning silver at their edges, others remaining a soft, bluish gray. The snow that still fell did so lightly in isolated flakes that spun lazily downward, each one catching a glint of color before joining the rest. The overall effect was of a world slowly waking, not with sudden brightness, but with a gradual, gentle brightening, like the opening of a flower in slow motion. Behind him, the ship began to stir in small ways. A door opened and closed softly as a member of the engine room staff came up to taste the air and glance at the sky. Somewhere, a bucket was set carefully down, its dull thud traveling faintly through the stillness. A distant voice called a short remark and received a brief answer, both sounds quickly absorbed as if the morning were not yet quite ready for speech. Below, in the cabins, passengers shifted under their blankets, some of them waking to the subtle change in light at their windows, others still wrapped in the deep, silver sleep that comes after a night of warmth against cold. As the light strengthened, a new shape appeared at the edge of the mist, low and dark and moving with purpose. At first, it might have been mistaken for another fragment of land, another patch of shadow among many. But then Anders saw the telltale puff above it, a compact plume of smoke rising straight up in the calm air, and he knew what it was even before his eyes confirmed it. A harbor tug, sturdy and unpretentious, was making its way out toward them, carving its own channel through the loosening ice. Its progress was slow but steady, the narrow bow parting the thin plates with a series of soft, distant cracks that sounded almost like polite knocks at a door. The sight of the tug brought no rush of excitement to Anders, only a deep, quiet sense of reassurance, as if a promise made in the night were now being gently kept. Help would come, as the captain had said. The ship would not remain forever in her frozen anchorage. She would be led, when the time was right, along a safe path to the harbor's sheltering arms. For now, the tug's presence at the edge of the scene was enough. A small, dark companion moving toward them through the silver morning. He watched as the tug's shape grew gradually clearer. He could see the little house of its wheelhouse now, the stubby funnel, the line of its rail. The ice around it broke and shifted in slow, obedient ripples, the thin plates tilting and sliding aside. Behind it, the small ship left a narrow wake of darker water that quickly glazed over, the newly freed surface beginning almost at once to reform its fragile skin. It was a careful dance between cold and motion, between stillness and change, and it unfolded like everything else that morning, without haste. A few footsteps sounded on the deck behind him, and Anders turned to see the captain approach, coat buttoned high, cap set firmly against the lingering chill. The older man's eyes were clear and awake, and there was something like quiet satisfaction in them as he surveyed the pale sky and the broken, glinting ice. "A good morning," he said, his voice low but carrying in the clean air. "The storm has given us back the world." Anders inclined his head. "Yes, Captain. The ice is loosening. The harbor tug is on its way." They stood side by side for a moment, two figures outlined against the brightening horizon, both listening to the same subtle chorus of cracks and sighs. "We will wait for her guidance," the captain said softly. "No need to rush. The night has been kind to us. We will let the morning be kind as well." As the sun's presence became clearer, though still hidden behind light clouds, the colors over the bay deepened into a gentle harmony of pink and silver and pale blue. The town's outline sharpened, the church spire rising like a quiet, watchful finger toward the sky. A thin line of smoke rose from a few chimneys on shore, evidence of other houses, other stoves, other kitchens warming into the day. From the ship, it all looked very small and very peaceful. A cluster of life gathered against the vast, icy plain. Between town and ship, the tug continued its slow approach, a patient, steady figure moving along the softened surface. Anders remained at the rail until the first faint sounds of morning within the ship reached him more distinctly. The clink of crockery in the galley as preparations for a simple breakfast began, the low murmur of stewards speaking softly as they organized themselves for the day, the muted thud of footsteps on the stairs as one or two early risers came out to see the transformed world. The steamship had passed safely through the long, snow-draped night. Now she stood in a field of broken ice and pale water, her windows glowing, her funnel rising, her heart ready to beat again when called upon. Around her, the first light of Christmas morning spread in a soft silver veil, and in that gentle radiance, Anders felt a quiet gratitude, not only for the safe ship and the calm sea, but for the way the night and the dawn had folded together into one continuous, peaceful dream. As the pale light unfolded more surely over the bay and the harbor tug drew closer, the steamship began, in small and dignified ways, to return from the stillness of the night to the gentle motion of the day. In the galley, cooks moved with quiet purpose, setting water to boil and bread to warm, their hands slower than on ordinary mornings, as if they too felt that this day should begin softly. In the cabins, passengers woke one by one, some roused by the faint change in the floor beneath their feet as the ice eased, others by the new quality of light at their portholes, a glow that was no longer the muted gold of lamps, but the delicate blush of morning. Anders moved through the familiar corridors with his usual unhurried tread, his eyes taking in the faces that appeared at half-open doors, sleepy, curious, and touched with the surprise of finding themselves still afloat in the quiet white world that lay beyond the glass. The announcement that they would soon be guided into the harbor passed through the ship in calm waves, carried not just by the captain's voice, but by murmured repetition. People accepted the news without hurry, as if it were the natural continuation of the night's gentle pause. Some chose to remain a little longer in their cabins, wrapping themselves in blankets and sitting by the round windows to watch the ice begin to part. Others felt themselves drawn upward, compelled by a wish to see the scene with their own eyes from the deck. Anders knew this impulse well. He felt it in himself after a final, brief check that the breakfast preparations were proceeding and that no one was in need of immediate assistance. He climbed once more to the open promenade, guessing that the deck would very soon be more populated than the lounges. He was not mistaken. When he stepped out into the crisp morning air, he found that a small, growing company had already gathered. They were wrapped in coats and scarves, and the ship's extra blankets, their shapes softened by layers of wool. Some stood at the rail. Others lingered near the doors, uncertain whether to venture farther into the light cold. The air was fresh and clear, carrying a faint sympathy of salt and coal smoke, but it was not cruel. Each breath they took blossomed before their mouths in delicate plumes of white, little clouds that appeared and vanished in steady rhythm. The early sun, still hidden but present in the brightening sky, lent the scene a gentle radiance. Every exhaled breath seemed brushed with silver. Against this shimmering backdrop, the black hull and the dark coats looked almost like silhouettes cut from fine paper and placed upon a glowing, wintry page. The ice around the ship had become a mosaic of broken plates, moving with slow reluctance, but moving all the same. Where the tug had passed, a narrow channel of darker water now wound its way toward them, its edges lined with shards of ice that gleamed faintly in the soft light. The tug itself, sturdy and small, had come alongside, her hull pressing through the fragments with quiet insistence. Lines had been thrown and taken, not with shouts and commotion, but in a series of practiced, calm motions that were barely more than gestures, men on both vessels working with the silent understanding of those who shared the same sea. The thick rope lay now between them, taut and sure, a simple, strong connection from ship to ship. When the tug's engine pulled, the larger vessel responded with dignified readiness, her own machinery beginning to stir more fully below, not racing, but waking as a resting heart wakes, ready to beat again. As the first tender shudder of motion passed through the steamship, the passengers on deck felt it beneath their feet like a slow, reassuring drumbeat. After the long cradle of the ice, the sensation of movement was almost like a hand placed gently in the small of the back, guiding them forward. No one cried out or clapped. The change was too solemn and too quiet for that. Instead, People leaned a little more on the rail, their gazes fixed on the shifting ice and the slowly approaching town. Some exchanged brief smiles, not bright or excitable, but deep and warm, as if they were acknowledging not only that the journey was continuing, but that they had all shared the unusual pause that had preceded it. Anders walked among them, making sure that blankets were snug, that boots were steady on the snow-dusted deck, that no one stood too near any patches where the frost had made the planks slick. The elderly couple came out together, the man supporting his wife's arm, their steps careful but determined. They stood by the rail and looked out over the broken ice, the town now clearly visible ahead, its low buildings and slender spire etched delicately against the morning sky. The old woman's eyes shone with a soft brightness that spoke of both weariness and delight. "It is as if the sea itself is lifting us into Christmas," she murmured, her words little more than a breath of white mist. Her husband nodded slowly, his gaze traveling from the tug to the shining cracks in the ice, to the round, glowing windows along their own ship's side. Anders, passing near, caught the phrase and tucked it quietly into his thoughts. It matched what he too felt, though he would not have put it into quite those words. There was something festive in the very softness of the morning, in the way the light touched the ice and turned it to silver tiles, in the way the ship moved gently forward, as if gliding into a long-awaited story. A little farther along the rail, the young sailor who had kept the lamps company through the night now stood with his cap in hand, his hair ruffled by the light wind. His cheeks were faintly flushed not only with cold, but with the satisfaction of having watched the darkness through to its end. He looked out toward the town, then back at the ship's windows, and Anders saw in his expression a quiet mingling of two kinds of home, the farmhouse with its waiting bread, and the ship with its warm corridors and listening walls. When he exhaled, his breath rose in a bright, cloud-like plume that hung for a heartbeat in the air before drifting away to join all the others. Around them, passengers and crew alike were drawing those same white, fleeting traces into the morning, as if they were all breathing visible, shared thoughts into the frosty light. The town itself seemed to be waking in gentle stages, much as the ship had. Smoke rose thinly from chimneys, curling upward in narrow strands. A bell, far off and small, began to ring, its notes floating across the water in a series of soft, measured strokes. It was not loud, hardly more than a suggestion of sound, but it threaded its way through the crisp air and reached the deck with a clarity that made some passengers straighten slightly and listen. The ring of the bell, the pull of the tug, the slow, creaking give of the ice, and the almost inaudible hum of the ship's engine forming itself once more into a heartbeat, all combined into a kind of hymn without words. Anders stood still for a moment and let it wash through him, feeling again that sense of being inside a shared, quiet blessing, rather than simply witnessing a practical maneuver with ships and ropes and frozen water. As the distance between ship and shore gently diminished, people spoke a little more, but their voices remained low, as if they were standing in a sanctuary rather than on a deck. They remarked on the glow of the church windows, on the delicate way the sun finally pushed a pale edge above the clouds, on the pink light that lay across the snow-covered roofs. Some pointed out the path that led from the harbor up into the town, imagining their own footsteps there in another hour. Others simply watched, saying nothing, letting their thoughts drift lazily among images of hearths and tables and doors opening. Many of them, though they did not say it aloud, felt that they had been given a small, secret gift, a night in which time had paused, and then this morning of pale gold and silver ice, shared with strangers who already felt a little less strange. The sense of having passed through something together lay gently over the group. No one had done anything extraordinary. There had been no heroics, no tales of daring rescue or great danger. They had simply been still, together, while snow fell and the sea froze around them, and the ship turned itself into a house of light. Yet, this simple fact wove a quiet thread between them. When their eyes met now, on the deck in the cold brightness, there was a softness there that had not been present at boarding. They had shared cocoa and stories in silence, listened to the same distant crackle of the ice and the same low singing of the violin, felt the same reassuring weight of blankets and the same tender hand of the night pressing against the hull. It had been a kind of secret Christmas, held not in a particular room or under a particular roof, but suspended over the frozen water in the body of the black-hulled steamship. Anders, watching them move and breathe and look out across the brightening bay, understood that this night and morning would lodge in their memories with a special clarity. In years to come, when they spoke of Christmases past, some small part of their thoughts would drift back to this ship, to the round windows glowing in the snow, to the stillness of ice and the gentle stir of dawn. They might tell others of it in brief sentences, perhaps over a quiet supper or by a winter fire. There was one Christmas Eve when our ship froze in the harbor, they might say. We stayed on board all night, and the whole vessel became our house. We woke to light on the ice, and for a moment it felt as if we were the only ones in the world who knew that particular morning. Those who had not been there might nod and smile, not quite grasping the exact quality of the memory, but those who had, even if they never spoke to each other again, would carry the same soft, silver picture within them. The tug continued its patient work, guiding the steamship into the clearer water of the inner harbor, where the ice lay in thinner, softer sheets. The ship's engine turned more willingly now, its rhythm still restrained, as if out of respect for the night just past. Gently, steadily, the distance between moving vessel and waiting quay shrank. The town's outlines sharpened, individual windows and doors taking shape, the figures of a few people on the shore appearing as small, dark marks against the snow. On the deck, the passengers drew a little closer together, not out of anxiety, but from a shared sense that something delicate was ending. The suspended, timeless feeling of being adrift in a white, frozen world, kept warm and safe among strangers. The day, with all its ordinary sounds and tasks, was approaching. For the moment, though, as the ship slid forward under the soft pull of the tug, snow still glittering lightly on her rails, and a faint plume of smoke rising from her funnel into the pale sky, the morning remained wrapped in softness. The ice, now broken, floated aside like small, shining islands. Breath continued to rise in small white clouds from every mouth, blending into the cold air and disappearing toward the brightening sun. Anders felt the deck move gently under his feet and let his gaze drift from the silvered expanse of water to the faces around him. The elderly couple, the city clerk, the young sailor, and many others he had come to recognize in small ways. All of them, for this brief, luminous interval, stood together in the calm between night and full day, bound by a secret Christmas shared above the quiet, broken ice. Now that the ship has slipped gently into the inner harbor and the pale Christmas morning has fully unfolded over the town, the story of that snowbound night could end there, with passengers walking down the gangway and the steamship resting quietly at her berth. The elderly couple would step carefully onto the solid dock, hands still lightly touching. The city clerk would heft his satchel and walk toward the station with a softer step than usual. The young sailor would look once more toward the distant hills where his farmhouse lay, and then turn back to his duties with a patient heart. Life would take them all in hand again, carrying them forward in days and weeks and years. That is one ending, and it is true, but it is not the only one. There is another way the story can continue, a gentler way that belongs not to the cold quay or the bustling streets of the town, but to a quiet place inside you where this ship has already anchored. Perhaps, As you have followed the voyage through snow and ice and lamplight, you have found yourself standing sometimes at the rail beside Anders, or sitting near the stove where cocoa steamed, or listening to the violin while the metal bones of the ship sighed in their sleep. If you have, then this steamship, with her black hull and golden windows, has already become a little familiar to you, not just as a vessel on a distant sea in a distant year, but as a house of warmth that you can visit whenever you wish. And for you, there is a cabin. Imagine then that you do not go ashore with the others. The gangway is lowered, the ropes are made fast, voices call softly from dock to deck, and footsteps begin to cross from ship to land. You watch all this from a small distance, perhaps from the shadow of a doorway, or from a quiet corner of the deck. You see the passengers depart, wrapped in scarves and blankets, breath rising in pale clouds as they walk toward their waiting homes. You hear, faintly, the bells of the town and the distant call of a cart on the snowy street. You feel a mild stirring in the ship beneath your feet, as if she is pleased to have brought her people safely in. And then, slowly, the crowd thins, the voices recede, and the deck grows still again. Anders notices you, of course. It is his work and his habit to notice. He sees that you are not hurrying down to the dock, not reaching for bags or looking anxiously toward the shore. He sees the way your shoulders have begun to lower, the way your hands have loosened, how your gaze moves not in quick, restless jerks, but in slow, thoughtful arcs. There is something in your posture that he has seen many times before in others. A weariness that is more than physical, a kind of tiredness that comes from holding yourself upright in the face of many days and many thoughts. It is the sort of weariness that is not cured by a quick nap or a cup of strong tea, but by something deeper, something more like being cradled. He comes toward you with that same unhurried step, his coat buttoned, his scarf neatly tied, carrying with him the calm of someone who knows every corner of this floating house. You do not need to rush ashore, he says, his voice low and steady. There is time yet. The ship has room for one more guest tonight, if you wish it. He does not press you, does not insist. He only offers, as he has been offering small comforts all through the night just past. Somewhere on shore, the world of tasks and appointments and obligations waits, as it always does. But here, on this quiet morning that still holds a trace of silver snow and broken ice, there is also the possibility of rest, deep and gentle. You find that your feet have already turned toward the interior, that the rail has become something to let go of, rather than something to lean on. You nod, perhaps without quite realizing it, and Anders inclines his head, accepting your answer as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He leads you along the familiar corridor, past the lamps that the young sailor tended in the night, now burning with a soft, daytime light. The carpet muffles your steps. The walls hold a pleasant warmth that rises from the heart of the ship. The air carries a faint trace of coal and soap and cocoa, the fragrances of a place that has cared for many people and now has time to care for one more. Snowflakes still cling to the outside of some portholes, delicate and transparent, like lace pressed against glass. The ship is at rest. She is no longer fighting waves or cutting through dark water. She is simply lying quietly at the quay, her ropes fast, her body calm, like a great animal that has settled in the straw after a long day. At last, Anders stops before a door you have not seen before. It is simple, made of polished wood with a brass handle warmed by many hands over the years. He opens it with a practiced twist of the key, and the cabin reveals itself slowly, as if it too is waking. It is not large, but it does not need to be. There is a narrow bed, neatly made, with white sheets and a thick wool blanket folded back at the corner, waiting. A small table sits beneath a round porthole, and on it stand a lamp and a cup, set upside down on its saucer to keep it clean. A hook near the door waits to receive your coat. There is a little chair, cushioned, where you might sit for a time if you wish, and a folded extra blanket at the foot of the bed, there for you should the night feel cooler. Anders steps inside ahead of you and lights the lamp, cupping his hand around the flame as he always does, until it rises into a steady, golden oval of light. He turns the wick just so, making sure the glow is soft and even, neither harsh nor dim. He checks the window latch, ensuring that the seal is snug and no draft whispers in from the cold outside. He smooths the blanket once with his broad hand, not because it needs it, but because he knows that the eye takes comfort in order. Then he turns back to you, and there is a hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. "This cabin is yours," he says, "for as long as you need it. You may lie down now, if you like. The ship will keep watch. We are in harbor, safe and still. There is nothing you must do, nowhere you must go, not yet." His words fall quietly into the small space, like feathers, like snowflakes, like petals drifting down. They do not demand, they only invite. Behind them stand all the hours he has just spent tending lamps and blankets and waking dreams, all the nights before this one in which he has walked these corridors, listening for the smallest sign of distress and answering it with calm. When he tells you that you may rest, it is not an empty phrase, it is a promise. You remove your coat, your shoes, your layers of waking day, and hang them on the waiting hook or place them on the chair. The cabin feels at once simpler and more intimate without them. You sit on the edge of the bed and feel the firmness of the mattress under the softness of the blanket, the way it yields just enough, promising support without hardness. The lamp's light pools on the wooden wall, warm and quiet. Through the porthole, you can still see a slice of the outside world, a glimpse of pale sky, the faint outline of the quay, a trace of snow on a bollard, the gentle, almost imperceptible movement as the ship adjusts to her moorings. The harbor is very calm. The water, where it is free of ice, laps in small, regular strokes against the hull, like a hand stroking a cat. If you listen closely, you can hear the ship's slowed heart beginning to settle into its new rhythm. The engine is at rest now, or nearly so, its great pistons quiet. But some small murmurs remain, like the fading echo of a strong voice that has gentled into a whisper. Pipes tick softly as they cool. Somewhere, far off in another part of the vessel, a door closes with a subdued, well-oiled thud. Footsteps proceed along a distant corridor, then fade. The sounds that remain to you in the cabin are few and tender. The faint hum of the lamp, the slow, soothing lap of water, the quiet sigh of the wooden walls that have held out cold and storm and now hold in warmth and peace. You slip under the blanket, drawing it up over your shoulders, feeling its weight settle around you like a kind hand. The sheets are cool at first, then quickly take on the warmth of your body. Your head finds the pillow, which is neither too high nor too flat, but just enough to cradle your neck. You feel the long muscles of your back begin to release, one by one, like knots untying in slow motion. Your breathing deepens without effort, each inhale bringing in air that smells faintly of soap and wood and the distant memory of cocoa. Each exhale carrying away a little more of the day's burdens. Outside the porthole, the light shifts slowly as the morning advances. But here, inside, time becomes softer, less insistent. You could sleep now and wake to afternoon sunlight on the water. You could drift in and out of dreams, feeling the ship under you like a steady, gentle hand. In your half-sleep, you might hear again the thin music of the ice cracking, the soft notes of the violin, the murmur of voices in the lounge, the patient footsteps of Anders in the corridor. All of it will come to you in fragments, silver and warm, weaving themselves into your own dreams, not as sharp memories, but as calming shapes and sounds. Before he leaves, Anders stands a moment in the doorway, his hand resting lightly on the frame. "If the lamp seems too bright," he says quietly, "you may turn it down, like this." He shows you with a simple turn of his fingers, the flame shrinking to a smaller, more intimate glow. Or, if you wish, you may let it burn as it is. The ship does not mind. She is used to keeping her lights for those who sleep. He pauses, then adds, "The night has passed, but rest does not belong only to the dark. You may stay here and dream as long as you need. When you are ready to rise, the harbor and the day will be waiting. Until then, this cabin is yours." He gives a small bow, not formal, but deeply courteous, the gesture of someone who has long served and never grown tired of the work. Then he withdraws, closing the door with gentle care, so that it latches without noise. You are alone now, but not truly alone. The ship is around you, above and below, and on every side, a quiet guardian resting in the harbor. The sea cradles her, the quay holds her fast. The town's Christmas bells ring faintly through the walls, softened by wood and wool and distance, their notes falling around you like soft light. You can let your eyes close now. You can allow the images of ice and snow and silver dawn to drift and dissolve, to reform as dreams in whatever shapes they choose. You are in a safe harbor, in a warm cabin, on a gentle ship that has weathered the frozen night and come to rest. You are wrapped in a blanket that smells clean and kind, with a pillow that welcomes the weight of your head. The world outside will go on turning, but it does not need you for a while. Your only task now is to breathe slowly and deeply, and to let the steady, quiet presence of the steamship carry you into sleep. May your rest be deep and peaceful. May your dreams be soft and silver, lit by distant stars and gentle lamps, and watched over by kind eyes that walk the corridors of your sleep as Anders walks the decks of his ship. And when you wake, may you feel as if you too have passed through a calm night on smooth, frozen water, held warm and safe in a quiet house of light. The cabin is here for you whenever you need it. You can stay and you can rest for as long as you wish.